The chalk scraped off the board, dry white. The teacher wrote something about responsibility, but no one really paid attention. The boy was in the third row, backpack still on his back, trying to explain what had happened at recess. The words came out fast, nervous, tripping over each other. "I didn't do anything, ma'am. She cut it off before it was finished. "You always make up stories." Her voice came firm. "Discharge." As if he had already decided everything before he even heard it. The boy blinked, confused. He tried again. But it was Jason who pushed the "Enough." The word fell like a slamming door. He felt his chest tighten. The whole room turned to him. Some boys were already starting to laugh softly. That laughter that doesn't explode all at once. It just grows, slowly, until it becomes a complete joke. The teacher crossed her arms, looking at him as if she already knew the whole story, as if he were predictable, as if lying was all he knew how to do. The boy opened his mouth again, but nothing came out. He realized, at that moment, that it was no use. No one there wanted to hear him. No one would believe it. Jason, sitting 2 chairs in front, turned to his friend next to him and whispered something. They both burst into laughter. Others followed. The room became an echo of mockery, each laugh pushing the boy deeper into himself. He lowered his gaze. Her hands tightened the strap of her backpack until her fingers hurt. The teacher kept talking, something about taking responsibility and stopping blaming others, but he didn't hear anymore. I only felt the weight of the inner silence, the one that screams louder than any voice. He looked out the window. The sky outside was clear, indifferent. Inside the room, however, everything seemed dirty. The injustice smelled. It had texture. It stuck to the skin. He took a deep breath, trying not to let his eyes sting. Not there. Not in front of them. The teacher returned to the board, as if the matter was closed, as if he didn't deserve even another second of attention. And perhaps that was the worst. Not being heard hurts, but being discarded before you even finish the sentence. It breaks something inside. The boy stood there, looking at his own hands. Small, shivering slightly. And in that moment, he understood something that no child should understand so soon. Sometimes injustice begins when someone decides that you don't even deserve to be heard. The teacher turned her back to the board and pointed the marker at it as if it were a physical accusation. "You're being disrespectful." The boy blinked, confused. He hadn't screamed. I hadn't cursed. He only tried to explain. "I was just saying what. Don't interrupt me." Her voice rose a tone. Sharp. Sharp. He felt his throat close. That strange feeling, as if the words had turned to stone inside him. Too heavy to leave. He knew that if he kept talking, it would get worse. He knew that anything he said now would be used against him. Then he did the only thing that seemed safe. He kept quiet, but his silence did not bring peace. It brought more laughter. Jason turned back, looked at his friends, and made an exaggerated gesture, mimicking crying. The whole room reacted. Some laughed out loud. Others just smiled, complicit, as if that was allowed entertainment. The teacher did not stop any of them. She kept looking at the boy, as if he was the problem. As if the disorder came from him, not from the cruelty around him. He pursed his lips. He tried to keep his breathing controlled, but his chest went up and down too fast. The kind of breath that betrays. He looked at the door, not because he wanted to run away, but because, for a second, he imagined that someone could enter, someone who believed in him, someone who would stop that. No one came. The teacher crossed her arms and tilted her head, as if she were analyzing a problem that was difficult to solve. "Do you know what I'm going to do? I'll call your parents. Let's see if they also make up stories or if finally someone teaches you responsibility." The phrase fell like a punch in the stomach. He did not answer. I couldn't. But something inside him trembled, not from fear, exactly. It was something worse. It was shame mixed with impotence. The feeling of being alone in a ring where no one saw the blows he took. Jason made an exaggerated "ooh" sound. The room exploded again. The boy closed his eyes for a second. Only one. He tried to remember something his father had once said. Something about keeping calm when the world got too noisy. But now, there, calm seemed impossible. He opened his eyes and looked straight at the teacher, not angry, not with challenge, with a silent question that she was never going to answer. Why? Why did she choose not to believe him? Why was it easier to call him a liar than to listen to what he had to say? Why did no one there, no adults, no colleagues, stand up for him? The teacher looked away first. He returned to the board. He wrote something. Anything. And the boy understood one more lesson that no child should learn so early. No one should have to face the world alone, especially a child. The teacher returned to the front of the room, taking a deep breath as if trying to regain control. She took her cell phone from the table, unlocked the screen. Her fingers slid to the contact list. "I'm going to call your parents now," she said, looking at the boy. "Let's see if they also make up stories, or if finally someone teaches you what is true." The class reacted again. Low laughter, whispered comments. Jason made an exaggerated phone gesture in his ear, mimicking a dramatic phone call. The boy didn't move. He just looked at the door, and then the handle turned. Slowly. The sound was small, but it cut through the air like a blade. The door opened. Silence. A man appeared on the doorstep. Big, broad shoulders, thick neck, black, sweaty workout clothes, as if I had just left the gym. Boxing gloves still hanging around his neck, swaying slightly with each movement. He didn't say anything. It just stood there, standing still, filling the entire space of the entrance. His expression was harsh, not angry, just dense, like stone, like something that doesn't move easily. The boy took a deep breath. He knew that face. I knew that floor. He knew the weight of that presence. It was his father, Mike Tyson. Jason stopped laughing in the middle of his laughter. His mouth was still open, but no sound came out. He looked at the man in the doorway and simply froze. Another boy, who was leaning back in his chair, straightened his posture so fast that he almost fell. The whole room fell silent. Not that forced silence, when the teacher tells you to shut up. It was the silence that happens when something greater than words enters the environment. Tyson took 2 steps inside. Slow, heavy. The ground felt smaller under his feet. He didn't look at the class. He didn't look at the teacher. He only looked at his son. And the boy, for the first time since the class had started, felt that he was no longer alone. The teacher still held her cell phone. She hadn't even realized who had entered. She was on her back, typing something, muttering to herself about responsibility and consequences. Tyson stopped 3 meters from her. He crossed his arms, and he waited. Sometimes, a firm presence is enough to silence cruelty. No need for shouting. There is no need for a threat. It just needs someone who occupies the space with truth. And in that room, at that moment, the truth was 6 feet tall, broad-shouldered, and with an unblinking gaze. The boy felt something rise in his chest. It wasn't relief yet. It was not victory. It was something simpler. It was the feeling that, finally, someone was on his side. Jason was the first to notice. He looked at the man standing at the back of the room and the color faded from his face. He turned to his friend next door, but said nothing. He just swallowed hard and looked ahead again, as if suddenly the class was the most interesting thing in the world. The boy next to him did the same. Then another, and another. One by one, the laughter died down. The laughter turned to whispers. The whispers turned to silence. The teacher continued with her back turned, typing on her cell phone. Still talking to herself, low, annoyed. Always the same thing with this boy. Always an excuse. She didn't even notice. I didn't see that the whole room had changed its posture. He didn't feel the weight that now filled the room. Tyson took 2 more steps. Slowly. The sound of the soles on the floor echoed like a drumbeat. Serious. Controlled. The boy felt his chest loosen a little. Not completely. There was still fear. There was still tension. But now there was something else too. Hope. He was no longer alone. And that changed everything. Jason looked back again, this time for longer. He recognized the face. Everyone recognized it. That was not just any father. That was Mike Tyson. The Jason who had mimicked crying 2 minutes ago was now sitting upright, hands in his lap, staring at his own desk as if it were the most fascinating thing in the universe. Tyson stopped a few steps from the teacher. He didn't say anything. It just stayed there. Property. His shadow covered half the painting. The teacher sighed, annoyed, and finally turned around. "Look, I already told you he needs it." She stopped. The phrase died in thin air. His eyes rose, and they went up, and they went up, until they found Tyson's face. The cell phone almost slipped out of her hand. He didn't move. He didn't smile. He did not frown. He just looked, direct, steadfast, as if waiting for an explanation. The teacher blinked. Her mouth opened, but not a word came out. She looked at the boy, then to Tyson, then back to the boy, and in that second, in that single second of recognition, something changed on her face. It wasn't exactly fear, was weight. The weight of realizing that I had done something wrong, and that now, there was a witness. Jason shrugged his shoulders and lowered his head even more. Another boy in the back row lifted his backpack off the ground and placed it on his lap, as if he wanted to disappear behind it. The truth, when it arrives, makes no noise. It only weighs. And in that room, the weight was so great that no one could even breathe properly. The teacher tried to regain her voice. I was just dealing with a situation of... Tyson did not respond. He just kept looking, straight into her eyes, no blinking, no rush. The teacher swallowed. Her hands trembled slightly. She squeezed her phone harder, as if it could give some control back. "Your son, he was making excuses about..." Her voice came out weak, shaky. Tyson stepped forward. Only one, but it was enough. The teacher stepped back half a step without realizing it. Her shoulder touched the frame. The marker that was in his hand fell to the ground. He hadn't screamed. He hadn't threatened. I had only looked, and somehow it weighed more than any words. Jason, who was 2 rows ahead, turned to his friend next to him and whispered something quick. The friend just shook his head, as if to say, "Be quiet." Another boy, who had laughed out loud minutes ago, was now sitting so straight in the chair that he looked like a soldier at graduation. The whole room had changed. No one laughed. No one whispered. Some were not even breathing properly. Tyson uncrossed his arms slowly. The boxing gloves still hanging around his neck swayed slightly. He didn't take them off. He didn't need to. They were there as a symbol, as a reminder. The teacher looked at the boy again. This time, her look was different. It was no longer an accusation, error, doubt, recognition, maybe even regret starting to crack the surface. She opened her mouth to speak, but Tyson raised his hand. Not loud, non-aggressive, only steadfast. A gesture that said, "Wait," and she waited. Jason, sitting in front, looked down and realized it was him. He had pushed the other boy at recess. He had let the blame fall on his colleague. And now, with Tyson standing there, Jason felt something he didn't expect to feel. Shame. He lowered his head. His hands closed under the table. Tyson finally spoke. His voice came out low, calm, but loaded with something that cut deeper than any scream. "What happened here?" 4 words. Is that it? But their weight filled the whole room. The teacher tried to answer, but her voice failed. She cleared her throat and tried again. I thought he was lying about..." "Found it." Tyson repeated the word slowly, as if he was tasting her taste. The teacher closed her eyes for a second. When it opened, there was something different there. She had understood. She hadn't asked. She hadn't investigated. She had found it. And based on that, I had humiliated a child in front of the whole class. The boy, still sitting in the 3rd row, felt his chest rise and fall. But now, for the first time since it had all begun, he wasn't trembling with fear. I was trembling with relief. Someone was finally demanding the truth. And this time, the truth was strong enough to be heard. Sometimes, silence weighs more than any words. And you. Would you maintain her posture or apologize? Tyson didn't take his eyes off the teacher. What happened? He repeated, slower this time. The teacher opened her mouth, but before she could answer, a voice came from behind. It was Jason. Everyone has turned. A skinny boy, with glasses, had his hand half raised. He looked at Jason, and then at Tyson. It was Jason who pushed Michael on the playground. We saw it. Jason closed his eyes, his shoulders slumped. Another boy, from the middle row, confirmed. It's true, he pushed. And when the teacher asked, Jason said it was him. He pointed to Tyson's son. The room was silent again, but it was a different silence now. It was not fear. It was for real, finally coming out of the shadows. The teacher looked at Jason, then to the boy with glasses, then to the others around. No one denied it. No one defended her version. The whole story was falling apart. Tyson crossed his arms again and tilted his head slightly, as if he was waiting for the rest. The teacher let out her breath slowly. Her hands dropped her cell phone on the table. She ran her hand over her face, tired, as if suddenly all the weight of the mistake had fallen on her at once. She started, but stopped. He looked at the boy in the third row. He was still sitting, backpack on his back, looking at her with that expression that wasn't anger. It was not a challenge. It was just, wait. He waits for justice. He waits to be seen. She took a deep breath. I didn't ask properly, he said, his voice low, almost a whisper. I assumed. Tyson said nothing, just kept looking. Jason raised his hand slowly, trembling. It was my fault, he said, his voice thin. I lied. I said it was him because I didn't want to be scolded. The confession came out broken, ashamed. But it did. And when it came out, something changed in the air. The boy, Tyson's son, felt something strange in his chest. It was not revenge. It wasn't satisfaction to see Jason get screwed. Relief to finally be believed, of finally someone admitting the truth. The teacher looked at Jason, then at the rest of the class. Several boys lowered their gaze. Some who had laughed now looked embarrassed. Tyson took another step forward. He stopped next to the teacher's desk. He didn't speak loudly, but each word came out with the weight of a hammer. The truth always comes out. He looked at the entire room, then to the teacher, especially when someone strong enough demands it. The teacher closed her eyes. He nodded slowly. She knew. She had failed, not only with the boy, but with the whole room, because teaching is not just about passing on content. It is protecting. It's listening. It is to demand truth from everyone, including oneself. The boy took a deep breath. He looked at his father, and for the first time that day, he felt like he could breathe without fear. The truth had arrived, and she was stronger than any lie. The teacher straightened her posture. He tried to regain some authority. He cleared his throat. He straightened his blouse. Well, now that this has been cleared up, we can go back to Tyson didn't move. He only kept his gaze fixed on her, and that look said it all. It's not over. The teacher stopped mid-sentence. He realized that no one was supporting his attempt to move forward. No one was pretending that it could just pass. Jason was still with his head down, hands shaking in his lap. The boy with glasses looked at his own table, ashamed that it had taken him so long to tell the truth. Other boys who had laughed now looked small in their chairs, as if they wanted to disappear. The room had no more noise. There was no more laughter. There was only the weight of what had happened there. Tyson took a deep breath. He didn't take his eyes off the teacher. You humiliated my son, he said, his voice still low but cutting. In front of everyone. The teacher opened her mouth, but nothing came out. Tyson continued, without asking, without investigating, alone, decided that he was a liar. He let the words land. The teacher lowered her gaze. Her hands closed, nervously. I thought that... You thought... Tyson interrupted, but not angrily, with something worse, with disappointment. And based on what you thought, you condemned a child. She swallowed. He was right, and she knew. Tyson looked out into the room. Slowly, He ran his eyes over each face. Jason, the boy with glasses, the ones who laughed, those who kept quiet. You too, he said firmly. They saw him suffer and thought it was funny. No one answered. But several glances fell. Some boys seemed to be holding their breath. Tyson turned his eyes to the teacher. Children follow examples. If the adult in the room condemns without listening, what do you think they will learn? The teacher closed her eyes. He pursed his lips. She knew. She had taught something there, but it was not what was on the board. It was something worse. He had taught that it was acceptable to judge without listening, that it was normal to ridicule those who were different, that there were no consequences for injustice, as long as you were the one who had the power. Tyson crossed his arms again. The gloves still hanging around his neck swayed slightly. You don't have to shout to hurt someone, he said slowly. Sometimes ignoring hurts more. The teacher took a deep breath. His hands trembled. She looked at the boy in the third row. He was looking at her. Not angry, not with hatred, only waiting, hoping she would do the right thing. And at that moment, the teacher realized something she should have realized much earlier. She had acted out of prejudice, not facts. She had seen a black boy trying to explain himself and decided, before she even heard it, that he was lying. She had chosen to believe in Jason, a quiet, well-behaved white boy, without question. And now, with Tyson standing there, that truth was impossible to ignore. The whole room absorbed that. Jason looked at the colleague next to him, then to Tyson's son, and for the first time, she felt real shame. Not because he was caught, but because he finally understood what he had done. Acknowledging the mistake is the first step to repairing damage. And in that room, everyone was starting to understand that. The teacher stood still for a few seconds, looking at the ground, to the frame, anywhere but the kid. But then, slowly, she turned, and he looked directly at him. "What's your name?" he asked, his voice low. The boy blinked, surprised. She knew his name. It was on the roll call. It was in the system. But at that moment, she was asking for real, as if she wanted to see him. Not just as a student, but as a person. "Marcus," he replied, his voice still timid. She repeated it, as if she were recording. "Marcus." The room was in absolute silence. Tyson was still standing, arms crossed, watching. But now there was something different about his posture. He wasn't pressing anymore. I was waiting. The teacher took a step towards the boy. He stopped at a respectful distance. And then, something happened that no one expected. She hesitated. Her hands trembled slightly. She took a deep breath, as if she was gathering her courage. "Marcus," he began, and his voice cracked. She cleared her throat and tried again. "I made a mistake." 2 words. Simple, but heavy. The boy stood still. I didn't know what to say. I didn't know if I should say anything. The teacher continued. "I didn't hear you. I took on things I shouldn't have taken on, and I humiliated you in front of everyone." She looked around the room, then back to him. "And that was wrong. Completely wrong." Marcus felt something strange in his chest. It was not revenge. It was no satisfaction to see her apologizing. Relief. Relief to finally be seen, to be heard, to be treated as someone who mattered. The teacher took another step. "I'm sorry," he said, and this time the voice came out firm. "Really?" Marcus did not immediately respond. He looked at his father. Tyson looked back, not with pressure, not with expectation, only present. Marcus turned his eyes to the teacher and nodded slowly. "It's okay," he said, his voice low but clear. The teacher closed her eyes for a second, as if a weight had come off her shoulders. Jason, still sitting in front, turned back. "Me too," he said, his voice trembling. I lied, and I let you take the blame. I'm sorry, Marcus." Marcus looked at Jason. For a moment, no one knew what he was going to say. But then, he nodded again. "All right." It was not instant forgiveness. It wasn't like everything had been erased. But it was a start. Tyson put his hand on his son's shoulder. He said nothing. He didn't need to. That gesture said it all. You did the right thing. I'm proud of you. Marcus felt the touch, and for the first time that day, he smiled. Just a little. But it was real. The teacher looked at Tyson. Thank you, she said quietly. To come. By, not to let it go. Tyson nodded once. Concise. Respectful. Strength is not about fists, he said, looking at the entire room. It's about protecting the ones you love. The words echoed in the room. Jason lowered his head again. But this time, not out of shame, of reflection. The teacher looked around, then to Marcus. I'll do it differently from now on, he promised. With you. With everyone. And at that moment, Marcus realized something important. He hadn't screamed. I hadn't turned it over. He had not taken revenge, but it had been strong all the same. Because sometimes, accepting an apology also takes courage. Class should have returned to normal, but he didn't. No one took the notebook. No one opened the book. The whole room seemed to be processing what had just happened. Jason was the first to move. He got up from his chair, slowly, and turned back. He looked at Marcus, hesitated. Then he took a few steps to the third row. Marcus, he began, his voice low. I'm really sorry. Marcus looked at him. Not angry, not with contempt, only saw. I know, he replied. Jason nodded. He stood still for a second, as if he wanted to say something else, but he didn't know how. Then he went back to the place, but something had changed. The boy with glasses raised his hand. Teacher, I also want to apologize, he said, looking at Marcus. I saw what happened at recess and didn't say anything. I should have spoken earlier. Another boy, from the middle row, got up too. I laughed, he admitted, embarrassed. And it wasn't funny. Sorry, Marcus. Marcus didn't expect that. He looked around and saw faces that, minutes ago, were laughing at him. Now, they were looking at him with something different. Respect, shame, recognition. Tyson watched everything in silence, arms still crossed. But now there was something softer about his expression. Discreet pride. The teacher stood next to the board, witnessing the transformation that was happening in her class. A transformation she hadn't begun. But now, she had the responsibility to continue. Tyson stepped forward. Not to the center, just enough for everyone to pay attention. He looked at the entire room. Slowly. Every face. And then, he said just one sentence. Short. Steadfast. Unforgettable. Respect should never depend on someone's size. The phrase fell like a hammer. Silent. Heavy. True. Jason felt as if he had been punched in the stomach, but not pain, of clarity. The boy with glasses lowered his gaze, reflecting. The teacher closed her eyes for a second, absorbing. Tyson looked at his son. Let's go, he said, simply. Marcus took the backpack. He got up from his chair, but before leaving, he looked at the teacher. To thank you, he said quietly. She nodded, her eyes shining slightly. Thank you, Marcus, for letting me learn. Tyson put his hand on his son's shoulder and the two walked towards the door. The whole room watched, but not with curiosity, with respect. As Tyson passed through the back row, a boy who had laughed loudly at the beginning of class looked at him and said quietly, "Thank you for coming, sir." Tyson stopped. She looked at him. He nodded once. And he continued. Marcus looked back before leaving. He saw Jason. He saw the boy with glasses. He saw the others. And he realized that something had changed, not only in him, but in all of them. Because education does not come only from books. It comes from examples. It comes from courage. It comes from someone willing to show up when no one else shows up. The door closed behind them, and the room fell silent. But it was not the silence of before. It was not empty. It was loaded. Loaded with lessons. Loaded with shame transformed into conscience. Loaded with respect that he had finally found a place to grow. The teacher looked at the class. "Let's talk about what happened here today," he said, his voice firm but gentle. And for the first time that day, the whole room paid attention. Really. The hallway was empty, silent. Only the sound of Tyson and Marcus, footsteps echoing on the cold floor. Marcus walked beside his father, backpack on his shoulders, looking ahead. But something inside him was different. It wasn't just relief. It was something bigger. It was the feeling of having been defended, of having been heard, of having imported. Tyson stopped near the exit. She turned to her son. I didn't say anything at first. He just looked. Then he raised his hand and adjusted the strap of the boy's backpack. A simple gesture. Fatherly. You did the right thing, he said, his voice low but firm. Marcus looked up. I didn't even do anything, he replied. Tyson nodded slowly. You didn't scream? He did not retaliate. He kept calm even when he was alone. He put his hand on his son's shoulder. That's strength, Marcus. Real strength. The boy felt his chest tighten. Not pain, of emotion. He nodded, holding back the tears that wanted to come. Tyson smiled, just a little. But it was real. Let's go home. They left school together. 3 days later, Marcus entered the classroom. The atmosphere was different. Jason waved at him as he passed. Not exaggerated, just a gesture of recognition. The boy with glasses smiled shyly. Other boys who had previously ignored Marcus now greeted him. Nothing had become instant friendship. But something had changed. Respect was there. True. Conquered. The teacher was at the front of the room, organizing papers. When she saw Marcus, she stopped. Good morning, Marcus, he said, with a genuine smile. Good morning, teacher. She nodded. And there was something different in her eyes. It was not a pity. It wasn't guilt still weighing. It was commitment. Commitment to do better. To listen better. To be better. Marcus sat in the third row. He took the notebook out of his backpack. And for the first time in a long time, he felt insurance. Not because he had a famous father, not because he had someone big to protect him, but because now he knew something fundamental. He had a voice, and she deserved to be heard. That night, Tyson was in the gym, hitting the punching bag, constant pace, controlled. Marcus was sitting on the bench, watching. Dad, he called, after a while. Tyson stopped, turned. Speak, son. Thank you for having gone there. Tyson took off his gloves. He walked to the bench and sat next to the boy. You don't need to say thank you. I'll always be there when you need me. Marcus looked at his own hands. But what if you hadn't gone? What if I had to face it alone? Tyson was silent for a moment. Then he answered. You were already facing alone, Marcus. You kept your cool. He maintained his dignity. You didn't let them take it away from you. He put his hand on his son's shoulder again. I just showed up to make sure the truth was heard. But the force, it was already in you. Marcus felt something grow in his chest. It wasn't pride, era, understanding. He had been strong, even when it seemed weak, even when he was alone. And now, he knew that he would never truly be alone again, because true strength doesn't come from muscles. It comes from character. And character, once built, no one can take it away. Injustice hurts. The false accusation hurts. But when someone's strong enough to stand up for the truth, the world stops, and everything changes. Sometimes, justice comes with gloves on, but he acts with heart. If this story got you thinking, leave the like. Comment on your opinion. What would you have done in Marcus' place? In the teacher's place? Subscribe to the channel, activates the bell, and share it with someone who needs to hear it. More stories like this just keep coming because you help. True strength does not scream, it protects.